accused of sexually harassing a man and I got fired for it. I am terrified of telling you guys this story because of who I'm gonna mention. The company that I worked for is very powerful and I think that they would sue me if I said names, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyway because what happened to me was really unfair. Back in 2018, I had just gotten married and my best friend was working at a company called S3 in New York City. At first, it was a really good company to work for because I was making a lot of money. The job was not incredibly hard. It wasn't really stressful or anything, so I actually really liked it. A little background on S3. It was a totally male-driven workplace. Majority of the men were middle-aged white men. My best friend and I were the only young females there, so as you guys can imagine, surrounded by all these older males, get stared at a lot. So my desk was next to someone called Justin, and Justin is the villain in this story. Justin and I sat next to each other and we became pretty friendly, work friends. I was not remotely interested in anything with him because I was married. We joked a lot. We talked about music. I'm a huge movie buff because I'm an actress, and he knew that. Specifically a movie called American Psycho with Christian Bale, which is one of my favorite movies. The joke was that he would be perfect in that role because he was living in New York, working in finance. My friend and some of the other people that worked there told me that ever since I had been hired, Justin was really friendly, in a good mood all the time. He would joke. Apparently, before I got there, he wasn't the joking type. He wasn't like happy or in a good mood. So that tells you a lot, right? I'm actually so nervous telling you guys this story because I'm mentioning names, but look at those brows. So I was very grateful for this job because it paid really well. To be honest, I just never knew what was coming. By the way, you guys, Justin knew that I was married. Like, we talked about my husband. One day I get a message from the guy who hired me at the job, and his name was Gabe. He was the manager. I get a text from Gabe and he's like, basically, don't come in today. We don't need you to come in today. I immediately froze and felt sick to my stomach. Obviously that's weird, right? For your job to tell you that. And I even texted Gabe and said, what's wrong? He said nothing. Sorry guys, I had to turn on the AC because I'm starting to sweat. The following day, I'm fully expecting to go back into work because I went to work every single day. If I'm not mistaken, I get an email this time from Gabe saying not to come in. I immediately text Serena and I was like, what the heck? She said, just relax, it's okay, we don't know what's happening. And I was like, okay, fine. Later that day, she tells me if I could meet her in the park. We both had a bad feeling. She had a bad feeling, I had a bad feeling. And as soon as I see Serena, my best friend, she starts to cry. And then I start to cry. She wasn't alone. She was with Jason, who was somebody who worked at S3 as well. By the way, Jason did the exact same job Serena and I did and got paid a whole lot more than her and I did. A whole lot more. Which doesn't surprise me coming from white middle-aged men thinking that women should earn less than men. I think the first words out of my mouth were, what happened? And that's when she says, I don't know why they're firing you. We both cried. Her and Jason comforted me as much as they could. I went home. And when I get home, guess who I text? Because I'm trying to find out information. I'm trying to find out what happened, what went wrong. I text Justin. You're not gonna believe this. I just got fired. And I asked him, have you heard anything? Have you overheard any conversations about why I was fired? And guess what he says, you guys? Jesus Christ. Oh, if you ever need any financial help, let me know. I'm here for you. That's really kind of him. And he said no, that he hadn't heard anything. And I decided to believe him. I got an email from the company sending my severance letter. I emailed back and I think I said, why? Can I know why? Like, what did I do? They weren't telling me why. They weren't telling me anything. Is that even legal that you get fired and they don't tell you why? Months go by. I'm on my honeymoon. I didn't have my honeymoon right after I got married. I had it after. Serena calls me and she tells me, I finally found out what happened and why you were fired. And I remember her even saying, like, do you want me to tell you right now or do you want to like wait until you come back? And I was like, no, tell me right now, which is so sweet of her for just even considering my feelings because I was on my honeymoon and she didn't want to, you know, ruin anything for me. She tells me that one of the other girls that was working there overheard a conversation about how Justin had told the owner of the company, Justin told Bob I was offering him blowjobs when no one was around and that I had done it on several occasions. Listen, I know men get harassed in the workplace, they get sexually assaulted, but here are the facts. I have been harassed. I have been sexually assaulted. And that's happened on several occasions. I would never repeat that behavior onto somebody else. I would never, ever do that. If you're watching this and that's happened to you, I'm so sorry. Also, why would I do that in the workplace knowing that I could lose my job? Why would I ever do that? So what could Bob, the owner, do other than fire me? Nothing. He was gonna fire me. They fired me. They didn't ask me questions. There was no investigation. You know what made me so upset? The fact that these people, they thought that I was a predator. And there was no way for me to rectify that. There was no way for me to be like, hey, that's not true. I couldn't defend myself. I wasn't given the chance to do that. This girl gathered that Justin had very strong feelings for me, that he couldn't deal with it, and that the only thing that he could do was to get me fired so that I could be away from him because he had very strong feelings for me. What happened to me after I got fired was pretty bad. I would say I was even traumatized. I was so afraid. What could I have done wrong? It was easy to just fire me, throw me away, like I was nothing. No explanation. It's like someone pulled the floor from under you and you're just left falling and you can't grab onto anything. Learn to recognize red flags and just, I guess, don't be as friendly to men in the workplace. And if you have a story time like mine that you want to share, you can send it to me on Instagram here. And I love you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. My boyfriend moved in with his gay best friend 6 months ago. Here's a little backstory. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. My boyfriend is a social butterfly. He has 1,000,001 friends. I got used to this very quickly because most of them were female and a lot of them were gay. They actually became my friends too in some cases. Early on in the relationship, I met one of his best friends. Let's call him Tim. Tim is very, very gay. And he doesn't hide the fact that he thinks my boyfriend is very attractive. I asked my boyfriend if Tim ever made him feel uncomfortable, and he said no. But here's the thing. Tim sometimes says the most outlandish things about my boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend is hot. He's super fit, has a great face, so Timmy loves to comment on his body all the time. On several occasions, he's made really dirty jokes about my boyfriend's butt and the things that he'd like to do to my boyfriend's butt. Every time they go out, he's always trying to get my boyfriend drunk. And when he succeeds, he always takes off his shirt. So then my boyfriend spends the rest of the night shirtless. Obviously, this bothered me, but it didn't bother me enough to ever be concerned. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks ago, Timmy threw a party and told my boyfriend not to invite me. I got really upset, so I showed up anyway. Timmy was trying to kiss my boyfriend. Part 2 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. I instantly knew the only reason I didn't get invited to the party was so that Tim could try to get with my boyfriend. But here's the thing. My boyfriend had so much patience for Timmy. Even though Timmy would make such perverted jokes about my boyfriend would laugh it off and tell me it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it did make him uncomfortable. But of course, I show up to the party anyway. When I got there, I found Timmy sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was clearly drunk, and Timmy was trying to kiss his neck. As soon as Timmy saw me, he got up from the couch and asked me what I was doing there. He said that it was a boys only party. When I looked around, it actually was. There were no other women there. I told Timmy that I was going to take my boyfriend home, and he said that I was overreacting and that my boyfriend was just having fun. I walk up to my boyfriend and he is so drunk, he doesn't even recognize me. I grabbed him and got him out of there. The next day, I told my boyfriend that Timmy was trying to kiss him when he was drunk. But of course, my boyfriend defended him. And my boyfriend confessed to me that he knows Timmy has a crush on him and that he's basically his best friend out of pity. Then my boyfriend actually told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Timmy. Part 3 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. That's when my boyfriend basically told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Tim. I decided to ghost my boyfriend for 2 days because I was so upset at him. But here's the thing, my boyfriend was ghosting me too. So I decided to go over to his apartment because I hadn't heard from him in 24 hours. My boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment, by the way. But before I put in the key to unlock the door, I hear moaning sounds coming from inside. I instantly knew what was happening. Quickly unlock the door and find my boyfriend getting banged on the couch by his gay best friend. It's an image I can never forget. I'm actually traumatized. They separate and my boyfriend comes running over to me. First thing out of his mouth was, "We were just experimenting, it's not a big deal." He thought I was gonna be like, "Oh, cool." I look over at Timmy and he's on the couch smiling. I couldn't help myself and I slapped my boyfriend really hard. I ran away and didn't talk to him for 2 days. He finally came over to my apartment after those 2 days and explained that it was just something experimental. And he swears that they've never done it before and that they never will again. I took him back, but I don't trust him. He says that Timmy will always be his best friend and that I shouldn't get jealous. What should I do?
Storytime about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimers are now my storytime instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her, and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says he's cute, but he's not that cute. What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? His best friend is a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have only been dating for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We actually met a couple of months ago on a dating app. We went on several dates over the course of 4 months, and after that he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes. While we were dating, I met a couple of his friends, one of them being his girl best friend, and she is bi, which I did know of. Okay, but here's the messed up thing. The day I met this girl, she was staring at me. Not just like staring at me a little bit, hardcore staring. She even told my boyfriend that I was so attractive that he needed to take care of me because she could snatch me up. And she said this in front of me. My boyfriend thought it was hilarious and just laughed at her. And to be honest with you, even though yes, she's a girl, she made me feel extremely uncomfortable. She would always compliment my body in front of everybody. She would comment on how my boobs are so big. We all went to the beach one time and she said, I quote, "If your bikini top pops off, I don't mind, girl." I did not laugh. She even went up behind me and tried to untie my bikini. My boyfriend thought it was so funny. Part 2 is story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. When she tried to untie my bikini top, I got really upset. I yelled at her, but my boyfriend thought it was funny. When my boyfriend and I got back to his apartment, I told him that his best friend made me really uncomfortable. And he said, "You're being so stupid. She's just a girl." I said that didn't matter because she always made comments about my physical appearance and how she was going to steal me from him. He promised he would talk to her and tell her to lay off. But this did the exact opposite. The next day, I get a DM from her saying, "So I heard I make you feel uncomfortable?" I didn't didn't respond to that and I showed it to my boyfriend. My boyfriend just said, don't worry about it, just ignore her. Then she sent another message saying, I'm sorry if I intimidate you. I was so upset that I replied saying, you definitely don't intimidate me. You constantly objectify me and that's completely unacceptable. Then she sent me a poop emoji. And that was it. The next time I saw her, I purposely did not even look her way. This was at a party and there were tons of people, but she managed to follow me around the whole night and asked me why I wasn't talking to her. Finally, she grabbed me and kissed me. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimers to my story time is that I'm on Instagram. During the party, she just kept following me around. She would ask me over and over why I wasn't talking to her, but of course I just kept ignoring her. I finally went over to the kitchen to grab a drink, and that's when she grabbed me, turns me around, and just puts her face on mine. She stuck her tongue all the way down my throat. It was disgusting. And she had a really strong hold on me, so I couldn't push her off right away. To tell you that we struggled is an understatement. And I finally got her off of my face after like 30 seconds. I pushed her so hard she fell backwards. And I ran straight to my boyfriend and told him what happened. Thankfully, he was really upset with her and went straight to talk to her. Honestly, part of me thought that he was just gonna take her side. We both went to the kitchen and he asked her what her problem was. That's when she told my boyfriend that she was convinced that I liked her, and that for some reason I was just denying it because I wanted to play hard. By the way, she did have a few drinks, so I guess it could be that. I told her that she was actually hallucinating and that I did not have feelings for her. I also told her not to ever touch me again. My boyfriend told her not to come around anymore, but it doesn't stop there. He actually tried to kiss me again later on. Part 4 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimers are not my story time, it's not even on Instagram. She promised she wouldn't try to kiss me again, but she lied. Just a few days later, my boyfriend had forgiven her. She made up a whole story to him that she was depressed about another girl, and that somehow I reminded her of the other girl. Then my boyfriend said, do you mind if she comes over? And I told him as long as she didn't try to touch me, everything would be fine. This time, I was gonna defend myself. Do you see where this is going? A few of my boyfriend's friends showed up, and then she showed up last. And as soon as she saw me, she came over and tried to hug me. I told her hugging was not necessary for an apology, that her words were fine. She then apologizes. Not 2 hours later, while everyone is in the backyard, I go to the kitchen. And she follows me again. This time she kissed me, but it was much quicker and I didn't have to push her off. Then she said, what, are you gonna run and tell your boyfriend again? Instead, I smacked her. Really, really hard. So hard, you could see my palm print on her face. Then she apologized and begged me not to tell my boyfriend. He's afraid of losing his friendship. And I actually did feel bad for her for a second, but I'm not sure anymore. Should I tell my boyfriend or should I keep this to myself? Bye. Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. I'll tell you that last month I made $60,000. Disclaimers is not my story time, and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, Sam Jojo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powder, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. But then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Fiance faked being rich just to get me to marry him. Should I leave him? My fiance has lied to me literally over hundreds of times. It all started when he and I met 3 years ago. I was turning 32 and going through a divorce. so I had no intention of ever getting into another relationship, at least not for a long time. Come from a really wealthy family, so I inherited a lot of money when I turned 18. That never stopped me from getting a job. I started working in fashion and it was amazing. Eventually, I became a stylist and had my own business. My relationship with my then husband was not going well, so we decided to get a divorce. But my ex-husband and I never really had hard feelings and we stayed friends. At the time, I was living in New York and had tons of friends. Every single weekend, I was going out. And since I was single, I literally had nobody to answer to. My friends and I would go to exclusive clubs and restaurants every single night. This is how I met my compulsive liar of a fiance. He was friends with somebody in my friend group. Now, everyone in my group was pretty wealthy. We all drove expensive cars, owned our own businesses, and we worked really hard. One of my friends introduced me to him, and within the first 5 minutes of our conversation, he told me that he was a Calvin Klein model. Of course, I believed it because he was really attractive. And he basically asked me how much money I made a year. And I was honest with him. I earned around $300,000 a year. That's when he told me that he was a millionaire. Follow for part 2. Fiance faked being rich just so that I could marry him. Should I leave him? The very first night I met him, he told me that he was a millionaire and that he was a Calvin Klein model. Of course, I believed him because he was just that attractive. Then he asked me how much I earned per year, and I told him the truth, $300,000. Look on his face was of utter shock. He told me he almost couldn't believe that I would make that much money. And he started talking about how he's a millionaire and he models and he travels around the world. I was actually impressed. Later that night, I asked a friend that introduced me to him if it was all true. She said, yeah, he posts about it on his Instagram, so I think so. Went to the bathroom and started looking him up on Instagram. And it looked like it was true. He did model for Calvin Klein and was modeling around the world. But honestly, from his Instagram, I really couldn't gather if he was a millionaire or not. It's not like he was posting pictures of him in a Maybach or anything. That very same night, he asked me if he could come to my apartment, and I said no. The very next day, he asked me out on a date, and I said yes. Ended up going to a really fancy restaurant, and he paid for the bill. When the bill came, it was over $1,000. Ordered so many things off the menu. But what I really didn't like was that he barely touched any of the food. The rest of the week, he invited me to all these different restaurants. On our second week, I asked him if he wanted to come to my place to have dinner, which he did. And the look of his face when he showed up to my apartment was like shocked. Finally, he asked me how much my rent was. That's when I told him I didn't pay rent, I owned the apartment. That's when he said, yeah, I own my own place too. And then I asked him, why haven't you invited me to your apartment? He said that he was getting renovations done. Exactly a month into us dating, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. Oh, I had not been to his apartment at this point. He had been paying for everything. Follow for part 3. Fiance faked being rich to get me to marry him. Should I leave him? At this point, he had been paying for everything. Every single time we went to dinner, any date we ever went on, he paid for everything. About 2 months into our relationship, I asked him again if I could go to his apartment. That's when he made up another excuse. He told me the contractor that was doing all the renovations in his apartment basically bailed on him. So his apartment was basically in shambles. I told him that I actually knew a contractor who could help him out. And he told me not to worry about it, that he had it covered. The very next week, he had prepared an elaborate proposal. He took me to Central Park where he had a band. He gave me a 3-carat pink diamond ring. Of course, I said yes. I was so happy. Never thought I'd find love again. After the engagement, I told him that we should just move in together. That's when he said, perfect. I can move into your place next week. I was like, what? He said that he actually wanted to sell his apartment. So I said yes. And the very next week, he moved into my place. When he showed up to my apartment, he literally only had 2 suitcases. And most of the clothes were kind of old and raggedy. I asked him where all of his stuff was, and he said, this is it. That's when I started getting really suspicious. I called his modeling agency, and they told me that they hadn't worked with him in 3 years. So apparently, he wasn't really a model. Confronted him and asked him what was going on. He confessed that he hadn't modeled in years. That when he met me, he was so impressed that he needed to tell me something to impress me. He told me he had a lot of credit card debt and that he actually couldn't afford the lifestyle he was showing me. Then he also told me that he never even had an apartment. He was sleeping on his friend's couch. I told him I couldn't marry him or trust him, and that he was probably only after my money. He swears that he loves me. No, he hasn't asked me for money, and he's offering to actually pay for rent. My friends and family think I should leave him, but I love him and I'm so attracted to him. What should I do?